Welcome to Nuanced Beauty. This podcast is intended to be a spot where my husband Bill and I will capture some complex thoughts and challenge us to hold to our opinions loosely so that we can see the beauty in others and the beauty in ourselves. I want to challenge us to dive deeper into those everyday topics and those sticky topics that we might shy away from, or we might bulldoze over others with our opinions. Because I think there's wisdom in this idea that if we all thought exactly the same, there would be no need for anyone else. So let's have a conversation and let's get nuanced. Hey guys, welcome back to Nuanced Beauty this week.
Hey everybody.
I thought we would talk about gardening. How hard can it be? Right, Bill? How hard could it be?
Incredibly difficult. When we moved to Florida, we had this thought of 364 days of sun. You gotta let one not be sunny. It's gonna be cold once in the year, right?
Yes.
So it's gonna be this massive growing season, and that's not how it worked at all. It's actually really, really hard
to grow stuff here.
Yeah, it's actually famously hard, and I didn't know
we didn't know that.
And what do you know?
We're just it's gonna be sunny and the weather is much more moderate, so I bet we could grow stuff way longer. And it is.
It's not moderate at all. It is insanely hot. I put shade cloth on our garden last year.
I know,
because there was too much sun in the sunshine state.
But we didn't know that. We were totally,
we had
into it with
no
ambition.
Idea. Well, that kind of brings us to what we actually wanted to talk about, which just like we talked about in the cooking episode, there's just so much information out there. Gardening sounds super hard.
Mm-hmm. Or it sounds like, oh yeah, I could totally garden if I took the time to do it. And
yes, those would be the two options. or it could be, I think it'd be a little hard, but I could probably figure it out.
Okay, valid.
There's the nuance. But how do we get into gardening to begin with? We had a friend back in Seattle who was an absolute insane person.
Yeah. Super gardener,
survival garden prepper.
Had a goldfish pond or an aqua pond in his front
He has
yard.
Another one.
He has another one.
He is growing, and this is getting way off topic, but he is growing nitrogen fixing algae in his koi pond. To top dress his garden.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this guy's insane.
So he's a renter. Him and his so the place that they're renting is his wife's parents' home. And so fortunately he had free run to grow whatever. But then they moved. They moved out of state.
And the landlord said, "Hey, that's great. You did all this, but
I gotta rent this place. I gotta have this place ready to go for someone else. No one else is gonna care for your apples, blackberries, koi pond."
There was an episode of Hey Arnold, to go way off to the left here, where Helga thinks that she's gonna die.
Okay.
And there's this long drawn out scene where she's giving away all of her things.
Yes.
And that is exactly what that day felt like. Because he had put all this work into these plants.
Yeah.
And being a good friend and neighbor, I'm like,
we'll take a couple plants.
I will take
some thornless
blackberry bushes.
And a couple apple trees.
A couple of apple trees and a couple of grape trees.
Oh,
grapevines that he had at the time, trellising up the apple tree. You never did get apples from that apple tree.
No, I wonder.
Or grapes.
Who knows?
That matter. But so we brought them to our house. We planted them, and that was it. I really just did it just because I could tell how much he was mourning. And there in the back of our yard, these stood until COVID.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
And then all the grocery store shelves emptied. And it wasn't as bad as the news made it sound. You all know that, but there was a level of, hey, I don't feel like I have to grow my own food, which is good because it takes months to do.
Could I?
But wouldn't it be cool if I knew how?
Mm-hmm.
So I started, getting into some YouTube videos and some reading, and I decided I'm going to grow some potatoes because if we're survival gardening, you need like a starchy carb. You need something with a high calorie density.
Uh-huh.
And potatoes are where it's at.
Okay.
Like if you're growing peppers and tomatoes, those are great, but they're not good nutrition crops. They're not good sustenance crops. They're good nutrition crops, but not sustenance crops, you know?
Yeah. So
I
you
go out,
bought some
seed potatoes.
Yes.
And you could just get this, you could just take grocery store potatoes and bung them in the ground. But I bought seed potatoes. I want to do it right, you know?
Yes.
And I put them in the ground and nothing
It
happened.
was like maybe 2 or 3. It felt like too long for nothing to happen. So then I was like, Bill, how about you just like plant a row of kale there?
And of course, I didn't do that. I said, maybe I'll get to it. And then you planted the kale.
I planted the kale.
You went and you said, I'm planting some kale. And like a week later, boom, we started
to have like leaves going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were knee high, and then they were like hip high. They're like giant, big, broad, flat leaves, just like. Wait, that's not what kale looks like at all.
Uh-huh.
Kale's supposed to kind of crumple, but there are different types of kale. Like that's
one, different type of
one
kale.
of the most eye-opening thing I've ever I learned getting into gardening was just how many different varieties of stuff there is.
Yeah.
You can't just buy potatoes.
Yeah.
There's like 5 pages in the seed catalog dedicated to potatoes.
There's a little more nuance for you guys.
Oh my God.
At the grocery store versus what you could buy.
You think, I'm going to go to the seed catalog and I'm going to buy some peppers. Well, which ones?
Yeah. Or tomatoes.
Oh man, tomatoes are the worst culprit.
But that also, okay, so potato story.
I think, okay, well, they're not crinkly, but maybe it's a different variety, or maybe we're not good nutrient density in the soil, whatever. It's not crinkly the way it's supposed to. I'm gonna take a bite out of this plant and see what happens. And oh my God, it tasted awful.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't look like kale, it doesn't taste like kale. I give up. I'm gonna tear these plants out of the ground and throw them away. And I'm out there with my compost bin, because Seattle, we had those.
Yes.
And I rip it out of the ground. There's potatoes underneath. Like so many. We had 25 pounds of potatoes.
Yes.
This whole time we thought we were growing kale, and there was potatoes in the ground. Was a little bit shows how hard is it? We did it on accident. Yeah. We thought we were growing kale.
Yeah, so that started like our trip down like gardening, and then I think that following spring or whatever, like just tomatoes and cucumber. I feel like a lot of people said tomatoes and cucumbers. That's where it's at. Mm-hmm. So we got some tomatoes and we got some cucumbers, and like we our blackberries, and we added a couple other berries, but the tomatoes and cucumbers did so well. Like it was the easiest thing. Like planted. I had like, the cucumbers we got were really thick. So every day I would eat a whole cucumber that I would slice as if they were cracker slices. And I would put cheese and like a brie type cheese, a spreadable cheese, and like a raspberry or like salmon lox, good stuff. And it would replace my crackers. And it was so good, so easy, right? So we get out here to Florida. And
before we even get there, we watched this documentary called
the Dirt
Back to Eden.
Oh, Back to Eden. Yeah.
Which was a documentary trying to say that, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff to our soil with chemical fertilizers and plastic sheeting and things. And really, if you just look at how the world works, mm-hmm. or in the paradigm of the movie, how God created the world, mm-hmm. go look at any forest, man. There's no like bare earth. Like it's all layers and layers and layers of mulch.
Yeah.
So maybe as we garden, we should garden with layers and layers and layers of mulch.
Yeah.
And because there are so many trees in Seattle, you can really easily get
wood chips,
giant mounds of wood chips. And so with a website called Chip Drop, which if you aren't in the Florida area, you can still look at it. Nationwide as a website, but I haven't had luck getting any here.
Yeah, they have it. It is, nationwide, but we've never received a Chip
Drop. I got a number of them in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm going to pile just the back corner of our yard with these wood chips.
Yes.
And that was like a tenth of the wood chips they gave us.
So many.
I covered our entire backyard with a foot of wood chips. And our yard was so vibrant after that.
Yeah, the next year everyone was commenting on our yard because we put the wood chips, and then we did get a little bit of compost, and then we replanted grass seed, and then the old grass came through. Most
of the weeds died.
Yeah, but the weeds died, and our yard was like super lush.
And like we had like a foot of wood chips, and then we had lawn again. And how did that happen? And that wood chip decomposed.
Yeah.
New soil formed over the top of it. The wood chips were still there. I dug a hole in the yard, and there's still like
there's a layer,
a band of this wood chips, but it has all that mycelial structure. It has the mushroom spawn, this white stringy stuff that's still like breaking down. There's just this smell of light and earth, man. And I grew up in the woods, and I remember that smell, and that was a very homey smell for me. The smell of this rich, the vibrant earth. And like, I kind of don't care about the food anymore. I like growing earth more than I like growing food at this point. Give me some compost. Give me some wood chips and some mushrooms, man. This is beautiful.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a different episode on composting, because that could get long real quick.
It can. But so I fell down this rabbit hole of like, how do you actually do this right? And I read too many books on this, and I guess it's really complicated. But at the end of the day, you put stuff in the ground and it grows.
Yeah,
you know?
like you do some things and you take notice. Like that's probably my contribution to this episode, because Bill has the passion behind it, and I have not read all the things that he's read, but I have I simply watch. And I was chatting with him about doing this episode because I feel like everyone has a fascination with gardening. Like, if you start an Instagram, you will have more followers on your Instagram in a month.
Because gardeners are so
Nuanced
nice.
Beauty.
They're such nice people. I put some plants out front, and like 3 people from the neighborhood like showed up and like, oh, what do you got growing? What do you got growing?
Yeah.
Do you want some seeds for this? We're like, me and Ramesh are like swapping cuttings from different plants. I was all worried because we live in an HOA. And our property backs up against a pond. Everyone can see what we're doing.
Yes.
I have 5 trees planted.
Yes.
6
technically, but you're going to have to pull one out.
One of them I'm just hedging my bets on. But I was all worried that the people on the other side are like, wow, what are those crazy people?
Because we're like, we don't know what exactly. I mean, we've read the HOA, but it's like...
It's subjective. It's very subjective. But everyone is so just like, they're rooting for us. Like, they want to see things grow. There is a strange fascination with growing things.
Yes. But then there's also this like sense of like, oh my gosh, like I totally couldn't do it, but I'm fascinated by it. But like, that's the thing, is like, what we were chatting about kind of goes along with the the episode on how do you feed yourself and cooking, that it is an art. Like, you simply pay attention. Like, when it comes to gardening, I was tossing around the idea of like, well, how do you get grounded? Well, you go cultivate the ground. Like, if you want to figure out patience and presence,
slow yourself
and
down,
awareness, watch a freaking plant grow over 4 months. Watch an heirloom tomato for weeks and weeks and weeks be green. And then all of a sudden you get a thunderstorm for one night. And then
it's like it was green,
splits.
and it was green, and then it was slightly kind of white, and then it was mostly white. And then one of them started to have kind of an orangish tint.
And then it was almost red. And then they all split because we had a thunderstorm. Which I guess, anyways, it's common for heirloom tomatoes from what we've read. But this is where it's just taking notice, like day in and day out, like what I've kind of like concluded with Bill. And obviously I haven't done all the reading for the fertilizing and such, which can get nuanced real quick.
Intense.
It can get very,
Talk
very
about your cation exchange capacity of the sandy loam soil.
But like, it is a wonderful, wonderful way to be patient and kind of like release control, but also like be proud that you like contributed to a thing that was bigger than you. But you did something. I mean, you did something every day. Like, you spent 30 minutes to an hour every day kind of checking your plants, watering, like looking at weeds, like, and being aware, like paying attention.
Yeah, there's a adage in farming that I've read a couple different places, that the best fertilizer is the feet of the farmer. Just being present in the space and just paying attention to things. And we planted some raspberries, and I was really worried about planting those raspberries because raspberries grow through rhizomes underground. They root sprout,
Oh, right.
So they can get out of hand really fast if you're not really paying attention. And Christina says, Bill, you're out there like every day. Like, you are paying attention. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I am. And I got deep into the nerdy stuff because I'm a nerd like that.
Uh-huh.
But the thing it is that I learned very quickly is that it's so individual
Yeah.
to
Your
your
area to
exact area,
you.
to your exact soil. All guidelines are guidelines, but we're in zone 9B
Uh-huh.
because even the almanacs are starting to realize the difference between 9A and 9B. But there's
Uh-huh.
microclimates. Like I'm planting on a north-facing hill. Like there's all sorts of little things like that on soil that was probably construction soil from when they carved out the lake, or even when we lived in Seattle. There was times that it was snowing at our house and not at Carol's house
Right.
because we were up at the top of the hill
Yeah, and she was close to the water.
and she was
Yeah.
closer to the water. So there's things where like oh, the book says this won't grow in this zone. Well, try it, and it's painful because you won't know the results of your experiment for a few months.
Right.
But just try something and observe what happens. The hard part is keeping detailed notes.
The notes, and also keeping your expectations in check, because that's something that I would say was also a big lesson, because we were like year 3 going into
kale.
year 4 of like gardening in Seattle, and like we expanded the gardening bed, we added more trees, we had mushrooms, like we had a lot of, and by mushrooms I mean red wine cap mushrooms, let me specify.
Yes. Yeah, growing psychedelic mushrooms is actually much harder than it looks.
But actual edible like mushrooms, like wine cap.
Those are edible too. But no, these are wine cap mushrooms. They're an entry level mushroom. They're supposed to be very easy to grow. The problem is it's just so dang hot here. But I bought them because hey, I'm interested in this. Like, you heard me kind of get off for a second there about the mycelium in our soil, but we just had it helps break down wood chips, and we had too many wood chips.
We had a lot of.
We had so many wood chips, and you can't have too many wood chips. Like you cannot have too many wood chips.
It just looked bad.
It looked great. It looked beautiful. We had a great pile of life in our backyard. What do you mean it didn't look good?
But where was I going with that? Well, I was going with we were like super far into gardening, like, oh man, like seeing the fruits of your labor and like having this vision and goal and layout, and not even like a super like layout well, but just kind of like, okay, adding this row, this grew well that year, this one didn't grow at all, maybe we should try again, maybe we shouldn't, like all of that kind of circumstantial like observations.
Those layers of mulch were developing into good compost as they were sheeting over the course of years. Like I was we were building soil structure.
To then move here, and we tried to plant last May, I think is when we got stuff in the ground, because we moved in March, and right now it's like the end of May, and like our tomatoes are about a goner, our cucumbers are going down quick too. And so like
it's getting into June, this is the end of the spring season.
Like this is for here, this is the end of the season. I have a bunch
of potatoes in the ground that need to be harvested. I'm essentially just storing them underground. They aren't growing anymore,
Yeah. And so we're kind of learning, but then also there is like 2 growing seasons here. So like we're probably going to experiment with like broccoli and kale and pumpkins in the fall, because we actually have been getting kale, but I expect it to die any day. And the pumpkins,
I'm so pretty proud of that kale.
It's done good.
I thought it was cauliflower
out of it. We put cauliflower, put cauliflower on one side and broccoli on the other, but it turned out he put broccoli on one side and kale, and it kept growing, and I'm like, Bill, this has to be kale.
They're all from the brassica genus of plants. Like they're all very closely related.
But it's
plants.
Like this does not, like, as soon as broccoli started to sprout on the other side, I'm like, that is not cauliflower.
No,
because we've grown cauliflower before. Like we only got one little tiny head, but from the cauliflower. But where am I even going with that?
I don't even know anymore.
Oh, getting here, like we had this huge letdown of like feeling like you gained all this knowledge and then you got to start over, and like the soil here, like they plow over the ground and they put construction sand and then they put crappy sod. Like a single layer of St. Augustine grass,
invasive vine,
which is,
and then call it grass.
It is terrible. It is uncomfortable. It is not nice to walk in. That it's not grass.
But one of the ways that the Back to Eden documentary discusses getting a garden started is laying down cardboard over the top of the sod that exists, then putting down compost, and then over the compost putting mulch and starting your garden there. And we started in May, which we just said was our garden's
Too late
dying
for
now.
here.
This is the end of the season.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of things sprout and then fall right over.
Yeah.
And it was just the worst feeling.
So
I was putting shade cloth out there, as I was saying. It was the worst. And I think it's more than just the sun. I think the black cow fertilizer at Home Depot. Yeah, I'm calling you out, black cow fertilizer at Home Depot. No, I think it's contaminated.
Oh, okay.
Because there is a thing with hay being fed hay that was given a weed killer, aminopyrrolid being fed to the cows. The cows poop that. It's still in the manure. They compost the manure. It's a thing.
Okay.
I think because I have friends who've had other experiences with that product.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but I think it's out now, which means maybe it wasn't that one. I think that one sticks around longer. Anyway, we had all that invested and we tried here. We immediately failed, which was just the worst feeling.
Yeah. So then I got him to grow some microgreens in the garage and in our guest bedroom closet over the winter, just so that like he grew something. Like I was like, well, how about you just grow some microgreens? And it totally did work. It helped. It was a boost of confidence because we didn't get anything last year.
If you don't know what microgreens are, this is something I picked up in Seattle in the winter because it snowed in the winter. You couldn't continue to grow. And what this is you take either a potting soil or an inert growing medium like cocoa coir, and you take bulk amounts of seeds, and you grow them in trays just so they start to sprout, and then you eat those sprouts rather than growing them to mature plants. And it's delicious and also very nutritious. I was looking for something in the way of a salad green. It doesn't really work out that way.
Yeah, it's smaller, like you good on a like a sandwich topper, like a nice layer of like it's not Brussels sprouts, but similar to
like a bean sprouts.
Yeah,
maybe thinner than that.
But you can do cabbage and carrots. Radish is very tasty.
Yeah. Radish is very tasty. And I heard carrots were good too. We haven't done carrots. But no, so we put all that work into our garden in Seattle and then really never bore the fruit of it. And now we live here in Florida and we live in this HOA that's very kind of cramped up against the house next to us. And we're here because of the elementary school.
Yeah.
2 blocks away that we will not need. We're really holding loosely to the fact that we're going to live in any house for any period of time because of the experience that we had. And I have 5 fruit trees in my backyard.
Yeah, yeah.
And
someone's going to reap the harvest.
There's a chance that I will never eat from these trees.
Hopefully we do.
I had some geese already ate from these trees. I'm pissed about. They got some leaves. My Reddit gardening friends are having a field day at that picture.
Oh gosh.
I posted it there. So yeah, there is this level of like and being okay with loving the process and not getting caught up in the outcome.
Yeah.
And knowing that, well, if this isn't a blessing for my family, maybe it'll be a blessing for others.
Yeah. And I think that
and hopefully they don't hate it and cut it all down because that would be
oh my gosh, no, people wouldn't kill trees. No, I'm just kidding. But I would say, yeah, I think that's really like a good component is like it has allowed us to take notice, spend time patiently aware and watching and applying some things and trying this and trying that and see what happens. And I think the last thing I would add that like is an encouragement for me is, and maybe others, when you're kind of detached from your food source and you don't realize how to make food, like, and I'm not talking like making food like cooking, but like to grow a plant, there's something that's kind of cool about it that like when you're like, being thankful that you're eating something, when you're eating something that you've grown, I think there is an ability to break down some bad negative opinions that you've created around food when you have taken the time to grow it. Like there's this ability to be grateful for what you're eating in a way that maybe we're a little bit removed from. And that kind of plays into my own journey when it comes to food and how I relate with food and how I overindulge, and like that goes into lots of body image topics. But I think that there is some power behind like growing a blueberry bush, raspberry bush, like growing a plant and then eating off of a plant. There's this thing that shifts in your psyche, almost like the way that you feel about the food that you're consuming. It's just different. And I think it's a very valuable experience to have. So
yeah, I think it definitely slows you down a little bit because you just have these 2 or 3 grape tomatoes that you were able to harvest today.
Yeah.
And you sure as heck not going to throw one of them out because, there's a little cut in one of them, you know?
Yeah.
Like you might with a big pot. And you also, you get these big bins of grocery store tomatoes, cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes. And, realize that this is like 6 or 8 plants.
Effort.
This is like 6 or 8 plants that went into this.
Yeah. And we have 3 different cherry tomato plants going right now, and we harvest maybe 3 to 5 a day. That's what we've gotten for the past month. So we're eating like 3 to 5 little cherry Everglades tomatoes, or like these little grape tomatoes.
We have a number of Everglades tomatoes, which is a Florida native tomato. It has a tomato maybe about the size of a marble, very, very small.
Very small, yeah.
And very sweet tomato. Then we have a grape tomato that we grew on accident. Because I did some composting. And then I applied that compost to the garden, and a tomato sprang from it. And I said,
"Well, let's let this go."
Okay, yeah, let's see what happens. And
we have the heirlooms, which I talked about.
We only know that it's a grape tomato because we still buy the same 5 things every week. And so we kind of took our tomatoes from our fridge and kind of held it up like, this one? No.
Is it this one?
Oh, it's this one. All right, it's a grape. Trader Joe's grape tomatoes grow great in North Florida. Hey.
There you go. But yeah, this episode's getting long, so how should we wrap it?
It's getting long because this is all about establishing patience, the long process, and a questionable outcome.
All right.
All right, this is the part of the podcast where we recommend a book for this week.
Yes, and as a reminder, the intent is not necessarily to make this a book club or that you read every single book we suggest every week.
No, that'd be entirely too many books. All this is just coming from the fact that a lot of the conversations we've had and the conversations that we've wanted to share have come from books that we've read and topics that we enjoy. So with all the books out there, sometimes it's hard to choose what you like. So this is our contribution.
Yeah, and we generally hope that it ties in a little bit with the episode.
All right, this week's book, I struggled to think of which one we should do because a lot of the gardening books I've read are just so incredibly technical or very Florida specific. And I just don't know how good a reading they'd be. But the one that I do think anyone who's ever thought about planting anything could get something out of is this book called Grow a Little Fruit Tree by Anne Ralph. Now, we had some cherry trees back in Seattle that were just giant. And we couldn't harvest half the fruits, and the crows got all of them, and it was kind of miserable. And to me, growing a fruit tree seemed just so intimidating because they're huge. How do I prune this? Is it okay to prune it? Am I gonna kill it if I cut off half of it? Well, it turns out no. It turns out trees are actually super resilient. And this book is a quick read. I read it over a weekend. Is a good primer on just the fact that trees are actually pretty resilient. Trees have been evolved to live in companionship with humans, and if you follow some very basic guidelines and realize that you really can't screw it up, and you really, and there's things that you can do that are better or things that are less good, but you really can't screw it up. Just cut stuff down, and you can end up with a tree that has enough fruit that you can feed your family and not have to get on a ladder. And that was my big thing. I didn't want to get on a ladder or piss off my HOA. Two major goals in my gardening life right now. So Grow a Little Fruit Tree by Anne Ralph. I highly suggest taking a look. If you've ever considered growing a fruit tree, if we ever move from this house, I mentioned that I have 5 fruit trees out back, and we don't know how long we'll live in this house. I plan on leaving a copy of this book in the house somewhere, just to warn the people if they don't. It's going to look pretty beautiful. Beautiful little backyard orchard we have going on. But if they don't follow the directions in this book, it's going to get out of hand fast. So take a look at this book, Grow a Little Fruit Tree, Anne Ralph. Check it out.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you aren't already following us, please follow us on your Spotify or Apple Podcast account. And look us up on Instagram at nuanced_beauty. Until next week.